Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program on astrology called Looking Up. This is a show I recorded in the studio in West Hartford from December of 2000 until March of 2020, and we all know what happened then. And I was actually the last person recording in the studio before they shut it down for the pandemic. And all through those months, I didn't do a show. And then, I found out you can do it from home and you can do it on Zoom. And I love Zoom. So here I am. And maybe we'll pick up where we left off because I had a good streak going for a long time, 2 whole decades. And you know what else goes on for 2 whole decades? The topic of today's show, Jupiter-Saturn cycles. So we're going to take an in-depth look at what was going on with Jupiter and Saturn. Remember, in December on the winter solstice 2020, December 21st, they came so close together, they looked like they were one object. And the news media made a really big deal out of it. And astrologers made a pretty big deal out of it too. And in fact, I wrote a whole big blog about it on my website called astrologybooth.com. And in the blog booth are the blogs, and there's one called something like, let me see what it's called. Big Planets, Big Meeting is a big deal. And it sure is. So I'm going to share my screen now and bring up a word processing document. You'll probably see the controls on the top. Sorry about that. And we're going to look at the, some things I want to tell you about with this. So Jupiter and Saturn are our two largest planets in the whole solar system. And Jupiter is much quicker than Saturn. Saturn takes about 30 years, just under, to go around the sun and to go through all the signs of the zodiac and to circle your chart. And Jupiter takes about 12, just under 12. And their cycle together is every 20 years-ish. So we had that big conjunction on the 21st of December, 2020, and it took place at the very first degree, the 0 degree of the sign of Aquarius. And sometimes when we have planetary aspects, we call that, when they make connections to each other, they'll do it 3 times because of that zigzag back and forth called retrograde. But this time they only were together once, although they were hanging out for most of 2020 off and on. They were very close. And they only had this one conjunction, and that is a big deal. Now, why did they look like they were merging into one star? Because the planets not only go around the zodiac, and I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can illustrate this. They kind of go around the zodiac, but while they're going around, they have an up and a down motion. And this you might relate to the sun, because the sun you'll see is higher in the summer and lower in the winter from our viewpoint in the northern hemisphere. And the sort of bandwidth that the sun defines by how high and low it goes is the main area where planets are moving. They can go off of that. They can go above it or below it, called out of balance, and they're off the regular playing field. But when they are in the regular area, it's, not always that they're same amount above or below the kind of middle line of that bandwidth. And if they're riding at that same level in the sky, it's called their parallel. And then they can not only get at the same degree of the going around degrees of the zodiac, but they're also at the same height. And that's why they can look like they merge into one star. But that does not happen every time they get together every 20 years. Now we're going to go back to the share the screen again. So this has not happened in 400 years, approximately. And the last time it happened was 1623. And the next time will be 2417. So see, that was 400 years ago, 400 years from now. Only the time in 1623, they were so close to the sun blocked them out. You couldn't even see it. So it was 400 years before that, in the 1200s, when we had the prior one that was visible. So think how lucky that was. And I hope if you weren't even able to see it with your bare eyes, that you were able to see it maybe online through a telescope. So when they change into a new element, you know, we have the 4 elements in astrology: fire, earth, air, and water. And they'll spend over 100 years in one particular element. Every 20 years they get together. It's at a different degree, but in the same element. So we call it a great mutation when their conjunction cycle shifts into a new element. So it was going through the earth signs from 1842 to 1981. And, you know, during that was the whole Industrial Revolution, kind of starting to lead up to the information age. They dipped back in for one 20-year cycle from 81 to 2000. I'm not sorry, didn't dip back in. They moved on into the air element and then dipped back to the earth element for one 20-year cycle in 2020. Now, what's important about this is it's almost like that zigzag retrograde thing. We get to have the sort of introduction of what's coming when they go into the new element, and then they have one more little last hurrah in the old element. Well, actually, what happens with this air element stays in air until the late 2100s. It does go into water from 2159 to 2179. That 20-year period is into the water to sort of introduce the new element. Goes back to the air element, this time not normal. It's 2 cycles it goes back for: 2179, 2199, and then starts its long mutation or transition and visit in water elements from 2238. And I didn't even calculate the rest because nobody watching this show is going to be alive that long. And let's talk for a minute about what this air element means. Air, think of it, it's the medium through which sound waves travel. So it's all about communication, and it's about relationships, because relationships depend on communication. You know, even if you go back to caveman days, it was like ooh, ooh, or, you know, make their sound signals or their hand signals or whatever. So when we are able to really communicate, and then you'll also hear people speak about the importance of a common language, because here we have a globe full of people and not everybody speaks the same language. But nowadays, you know, let's say in the sort of modern era, mathematics is a language everybody understands. Even for millennia, music is a language everybody understands. And we do have probably nowadays programs where you can just put in a phrase in German and it translates it right into English for you. So we're starting to get way closer to a common language. But when we had the long Earth period, we had the development of all kinds of physical systems: railroads, highways, bridges, rockets into the air. And now that we're moving into the information age, when it first came in between 81 and 2000, that's when we all got cell phones and PCs, and we got connected with everybody globally through information technology. And now information is almost more of the new arena for inventions than physical objects are. So that's one of the ways we see we're moving away from earth into the air element. Now we'll go back to our Word document. So our next slide, let's see, they're not really slides. So Aquarius is a very important sign for this year, even though we had previews of coming attractions, I could say, last year, because Saturn came into Aquarius March 21st on the spring equinox last year. And then it went back into Capricorn on July 1st, remaining there until the 17th of December. That's when it came into Aquarius for a much longer visit. It usually spends 2.5 to 3 years in any given sign. And so it'll be there until March of 2023. Now, Jupiter, we said, is a lot quicker. It came into Aquarius not until 12/19 of 2020, just before the conjunction on 2021. And it really moves pretty quickly through Aquarius. And it goes and dips its feet into Pisces just for a little bit this spring into summer, from May 13th to July 28th. And then it's back into Aquarius for most of the rest of the year, from July 28th to the 28th of December. Now, Aquarius gives you that idea. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. I'm not going to sing anymore because I'm not a singer. And that's the time for harmony and understanding, peace and brotherhood. It's the sign that rules humanitarianism and friends, groups and associations. So those are all areas that are going to become more and more important this year and next year, but particularly 2021. When we have both Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius, it's the most, let's say, strong of that influence. And now let's look at, we're going to have a new moon. Well, actually, we had a full moon, the 28th. Whoops, wrong document. Yes, this is what happens when we're in, zooming from home. This is the chart from the full moon on the 28th of January. This is the sun and the moon. When they're exactly across from each other, that's what defines a full moon. This is Jupiter, 9 degrees Aquarius. They're both at the same degree, and that's why we have a really strong influence of Jupiter around that full moon. And I don't know if you started being maybe more hopeful around that time, but Jupiter is a planet of optimism. I know one thing that happened very close to that time is the United States, which was, if you use the July 4th, 1776 birth date, and it's really more of a conception date because we weren't a country then, we had no constitution, but we sort of started then. That was moon in Aquarius. So we have some Aquarius energy to the USA. And this was around the time with the new President Biden in his administration is getting us back into the World Health Organization and returning to the Paris Climate Accord. And I think it was on the 28th, if not the 27th, the 27th, maybe the 26th, when he made a call to Putin and, kind of registered our displeasure on several different things that the prior president never even said anything to Putin about. So the international side of things relates to Jupiter. That's why I'm sort of bringing that up in this instance. We can see here Saturn also in Aquarius, not very far from the sun. So we have that sun sort of sandwiched in with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction energy. And they're still kind of conjunct when they're only less than 5 degrees apart like this. Then we're going to come to the next major thing is the full, that's a new moon. The next thing is the new moon. When the moon joins the sun, and they'll both be here in Aquarius at 23 on February 11th, that's the next moon cycle. And we can see at this time, this is Venus together with Jupiter. That's a beautiful combination. They're almost too close to the sun. I don't know if you'll be able to see them just before sunrise, possibly, but this might be they're sort of blinded by the light of the sun. But they're the two brightest planets, both easily visible to the naked eye, and together they mean Jupiter big, Venus love, heart big, love, and international Jupiter, Venus peace. I think a cycle starting with that February 11th new moon starts to bring the temperature down on some of the maybe difficult relationships that have been going on, between countries, and even when you talk about between people or between friends. There's been a lot of division between friends. I've had difficult conversations with some because we're on very different sides of the political divide. And so much changed in 2020, and it wasn't only just due to COVID, but Jupiter big was together with Pluto, which means transformation, death, things about financial cycles. So we had some recession, we had, an international big death experience with the COVID that we're not really done with yet. We've had Pluto and Eris. Eris is like a discord and chaos. They're both dwarf planets, but they have big um, manifestations. And they have 5 of these squares of friction. And 3 were in 2020, and 2 remain in 2021, in August and October, I believe. And so I think that's why it's going to take us into later this year before we're really on top of this whole COVID crisis. It's been crazy. But at any rate, let's go back to our Word document. Okay. So, Saturn is a lot about boundaries, rules, regulations. And when we see that in Aquarius, it's sort of about the rules that society operates under. And I might just say that, Pluto, the planet of extremes, and with Jupiter, it was big extremes and, kind of all or nothing, black or white. I think that also contributed to this sort of division in our country. Now, just to add some more Aquarius fuel to our fire, Mercury is about to go retrograde. I'm taping this, I think this is the 29th. Okay, and tomorrow, the 30th, it goes backwards, but it's already been, in the range that it's going to back up over since the 15th of January. So it's the actual reverse direction from the 30th of January to February 20th. And then it has to go forward through that range it backed up over, and it doesn't exit that range till March 13th. And the range is between 11 and 26 degrees of Aquarius. So you could look in your chart and see where is Aquarius. It looks like those 2 wavy signs above each other, zigzaggy kind of equal sign. And look for the degrees to see where you have 11 to 26. It may bridge across the dividing line between 2 houses called the cusp. So it might be partly in one house and partly in another house. But those areas are where you're going to be concentrating a lot of communication energy and thought over the course of the next few weeks. And maybe something needs to be revised in that part of your life. The retrograde Mercury is always good for revisiting and rethinking and research and redoing. It's a lot of re's with the retrograde that starts with RE. During this zigzagging back and forth, Mercury crosses paths with Jupiter 3 times. The first was the 11th of January. The second is on Valentine's Day, and the third is March 4th. Now, Valentine's Day, it's past that new moon on the 11th of February, so we've got that big heart influence in there. And when we have Jupiter bigness with Mercury communication, it means we talk a lot, we think a lot. Maybe we talk loud, or maybe we talk again about something we've talked about before, or maybe we get back in touch with somebody we haven't been in touch with, perhaps somebody who's at a long distance, because that's another Jupiter thing. So maybe you'll hear from an old love or an old friend around Valentine's Day, or maybe there's somebody you'd like to get in touch with. But again, where these degrees of Aquarius are occurring, 5, 13, and 17 going on 18, those will be key points in your chart where you could have something big to say or share something with people far and wide. Jupiter is the planet related to the internet, you might even say social media in a way, although the social aspect kind of brings in some of the Uranus friendship idea too. Um, maybe there's something you've been wanting to put on a YouTube video, or maybe you just want to catch up on some of the things that are online that you haven't had time for lately. All of that's going to be really good around these 3 dates. Well, one of them already went by. So you got 2 coming up, perhaps depending on when you see this show. I knew I was getting ahead of myself. So we have those full moon and new moon that we looked at before with the charts. And I want to talk for a minute about what the age of Aquarius means. And I know we have addressed this before. There is a 26,000 year cycle. Because the Earth on its axis wobbles ever so slowly and points its pole at different pole stars, and the sign where the sun is moving through the constellations at the spring equinox slowly backtracks over time. It's called the preceding of the equinoxes. And it goes through a sign for about 2,160 years would be the average. That's a long time. But out of the 26,000 year cycle, divide by 12, that's where you get the 2,160. So we're currently sort of at the borderline between the age of Pisces that encompassed the time of Christ and Christianity, and going into this new age of Aquarius. And when they happen, the age shifting, because it's going backwards, it goes from 0 Pisces to 29 Aquarius, the sign before. So you think, oh, 0 Aquarius is the beginning of Aquarius, and that's where we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, but it's not where the age of Aquarius entry occurs. And when we look at where this spring equinox point was in relation to like the rope that holds the fish together in the constellation of Pisces, there are 7 major stars in that rope. This relates to, in the book of Revelation, the breaking of the 7 seals. And Don Cerow, Cerow, wrote a book or 2 about this, and this is where I've gotten the information. But he had predicted that the time of the last star in Pisces that the spring equinox crossed would sort of mark the end or the beginning of the end of the age of Pisces. That date turned out to come in February of 2013. And that day that he had predicted was the day that Pope Benedict resigned from being Pope. And lightning actually struck the Vatican that day too. There's a famous photograph you can find of that. So if you want to talk about something major changing in the Catholic Church, that's one of the primary sort of associations with the age of Pisces, I thought he was pretty right on. But there's a lot of space. It's almost like, I call it brackish water, where, like in the Connecticut River, it's called the land of the long tidal river. That's what Karnataka means in the old Indian language. The fresh water comes down into the ocean. The ocean water comes up into the fresh water. So there's that blending of salt and fresh water. So right now we're in the blending between Pisces and Aquarius. And that spring point has not quite crossed into the constellation of Aquarius yet. But I've been looking forward to that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 Aquarius, changing the great mutation into the air signs since I started studying astrology more than 40 years ago. And I said, to me, that's the real dawning of the age of Aquarius. So we are just about there, or we're there. This is the information time. And there are 2 articles in the study booth at astrologybooth.com, my own article about the age of Aquarius, and then one written by Don Cerow. Now, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. And Uranus, it's a planet of volatility and surprises and things that come out of the blue, and it rules lightning and electricity and technology. And it's currently going through Taurus, an earth sign. So this helps us freshen up and bring technology in about things related to the earth. And we'll probably have a lot of developments in the next few years regarding electricity production in new ways that are friendlier to the earth. Meanwhile, this year, we have a very difficult connection, and probably most difficult one of 2021 is Saturn at that 90-degree friction position with Uranus. And this is something that, Mitchell Scott Lewis, another astrologer who used to be a commodities trader, and he looks at all of the financial cycles in the United States, he noticed that every time the USA had a crash, a panic, a recession, a depression, it always correlated with a harsh connection between Saturn and Uranus. The first one is here in February. That's one reason why I wanted to give you a heads up about this. 217 comes back at 614, comes back, finishes on Christmas Eve day. And these degrees are Saturn in Aquarius at 7, Uranus in Taurus at 7, etc., 13, 11. So just realize we already knew our economy was having difficulty because of COVID, and we're going to do some possibly very drastic things, new rules, new laws that relate to Saturn, kind of a new structure coming right away to start with. So you may want to take some precautions in your own financial arena. Okay, and there's that. I was talking about Pluto and Eris that have two more squares, August 27th and October 9th. So the last thing I want to tell you right before we finish up is look at your chart. See where is Aquarius. Look at what house or houses it is in. And then you can also go in my website, astrologybooth.com. The beginner topics in the study booth has something called the Astrologer's Apprentice Cheat Sheet. It's a free PDF you can download. And also there's something called, there's a whole tab, resources for the year. You get some interesting things for 2021 in there. In the blog booth, you can read about big planets. Big meeting is a big deal. But when you get that cheat sheet, it has a whole thing about the 12 houses, what each of them relate to. So when you identify your houses, you can go to that cheat sheet, see what houses do you want to do something important with, because Jupiter means big and Saturn means plan. So you can make a big plan. It could even have ramifications that go out for 20 years in the area of your life described by the house where that conjunction took place at 0 Aquarius. So that concludes our first home Zoom primitive graphics looking up for 2021. And I hope to see you again soon.